Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone's aware that the presentation is being recorded. I am Beth Courtwright, the Operations Manager at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAC, here in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's talk. I do want to acknowledge the wonderful members and donors at PEAC and also our partners like the Mountaineers for all of their generous support and partnership over the years. For details about other PEAC programs coming up, do see or visit us at peaknature.org. I'll pass it over to Sylvie now to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome, everybody. And welcome to those of you on Zoom. So glad to have you for our March meeting. My name is Sylvie Adam. I'm this year's president of the Los Alamos Mountaineers, but we also have 9 other board members in the room. Yay, most everybody's here. So if you want to talk to a Los Alamos Mountaineers board members, we are here in the room. Okay. I just want to say that we had agreed for Evan Rose and I to alternate this task, but that man is gallivanting again, out of state, so you get me 3 meetings in a row, but he'll pay for it. So, Evan, you up in April. Here's our agenda for tonight. I won't read it, I'll just right away pass it to Bill, who will take over for Tony with a climbing school update. Here we go, Bill.
The climbing school is just around the corner. We revived the climbing school just last year after a few years of hiatus. We're very excited that it's on again in collaboration with Mountain Skills of Taos, New Mexico. We're getting some good interest in the course. It is still open. There are still opportunities to join in. So sign up if you're interested, tell your friends. In particular, we've had some very generous contributions of funds for scholarships, which we want to engage people in climbing who, for whom the fee for this course might be a barrier. So if you know, say, young folks who might be interested in the school but might not be able to hack it financially, there's a scholarship process. Please let us know. And we'd also like to get some experienced climbers from the club to go up there, 1 or 2 per session, just to help with the course and to represent the Mountaineers at the school. So people who are comfortable with climbing, who would like to go up and help, please let Tony know. Email me being Tony. The scholarships are in name of the late Jim Strait, life member, who we just lost this year. In memory of Jim Strait, besides the scholarships, we have a lot of his gear, including his very nice carabiners. They're still here. If you want a carabiner souvenir in memory of Jim, pick one up. I'll put them by the side here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good job with the climbing school. I think next I will hand it to Jean Dewart to do the trip report.
All right, we had a great late February and most of March for trips for the club. The end of February was dry and warm in many places in the country. And our very own Ann Setsangi, who gave a presentation last year about the American Birkebeiner ski race, got to do it again this February. it was dry and warm in Wisconsin. And so you can see on the top right, they had to shorten the course a bit and bring in some snow for it. But Anne and her family and her team, they had a ball skiing. So Anne is recruiting for next year's Birkebeiner, next February. And the real one is 55 kilometers. Okay, so get your practice in. The warm weather continued here in New Mexico at the end of March, and so Franz Cordova led a trip with friends up Picacho Peak, which is on the east side of Santa Fe, and it was nice, warm, and sunny, and you can see over to the Jemez that there wasn't too much snow, so this was a perfect hike for that time. But I'm happy to say, let's see, wrong way. Winter returned in March. Yay. And Setsangi led us off with a trip with 5 Nords. That's kind of a nickname for Nordic skiers. And they skied after doing a bunch of skiing on the Nordic trails at Pajarito Mountain. They decided, hey, there's enough snow. Let's ski the pipeline road back to Los Alamos. And is that like 9 or 10 miles, something like that? Yeah, it's 10. 10.3 miles, and they had a great time. They hit the snow conditions just right. Very adventurous. And the one club trip we had, a group of us went up to Cumbres Pass on March 10th, and we did a one-way ski from the Neff Mountain Trailhead to back to Cumbres Pass. And we had great snow and great sunny weather, and it just felt wonderfully winter in the mountains. And it kept coming, the snow kept coming. There was a 15-inch snow over at the Santa Fe Ski Basin, and Olivia Lee led a group of 9 snowshoers up Deception Peak. And that was a lot of work. That's a steep trail, and that's a lot of new snow. But they had bright blue skies, and they had a ball. A week later, Pajarito Mountain got 3 feet of snow. And Olivia was out again with only 1 pal this time, and they snowshoed from Pajarito out to the Los Pozos Overlook, which is about a 5-mile round-trip snowshoe hike in the fog, in the snow, and the bright sun. And I want to note their very good trail etiquette. The snowshoers are hiking beside the cross-country ski trails, not hiking on them. So way to go, Olivia. Because of all that snow, Franz Cordova led a second trip this last month, and she took a group up to a lower elevation hike to Window Rock. And this is about a 10-mile round-trip hike that starts out a couple of miles north of Espanola. And it comes to a beautiful geologic formation. And then it also has a beautiful shrine along the way that's been carved into the rocks. And then the Wednesday hiking group did because it was neither fish nor fowl, everything was sort of wet, but not great. So we hiked on the Canyon Rim Trail to go support our Los Alamos Co-op Market. All right, now for the upcoming trips. Lots of things in the queue for us. Tosh is continuing to do his Winter Power Up series, and this is for folks who would like to skin up and ski down Pajarito first thing in the morning. And he does it on Thursdays, and you meet him at the bottom of the Aspen Lift, the triple chair at Pajarito. You'll recognize Tosh because he has a garland around his neck of Christmas lights. Bill Podorsky is doing a spring canyon country hiking trip out of Blanding, Utah. There's room on this trip. They'll stay in some condominiums in Blanding and spend several days hiking and exploring the canyons around Blanding, Utah. And then Bill's spring llama trip goes to Tickaboo Canyons in Utah, starting May 5th. And there's one spot open, so that's kind of a nice opportunity to join in. And all of these trips are described on the Mountaineers website on the upcoming trips, so you can get all the details. Then a very adventurous trip this summer in July that Tanya Pietras is leading to the Revelation Mountains that are on the west side of Denali Peak. And it could be one of the most remote mountain ranges in the United States. She's looking for 2 more companions, and you need to be a tough dude or dudette to join in. It should be fabulous. Kathleen Grutzmacher has advertised a return to the 10th Mountain Division huts this summer to do a hike and bike trip, August 12th through 15th. The trip filled up immediately after posting, but Kathleen has a waiting list, and often people have to drop out at the last minute. So if you have an interest, give Kathleen a ring and put your name on the list. Really great opportunity to drive to one of the 10th Mountain Division huts that are about at 11,000 feet, and then hike and bike from there. A really great trip. And then Bill's just announced, that's Bill Podorsky, Bill P., his 16th annual Moab Hike, Bike, and Explore. And he's reserved the Moab Retreat House for November 2nd through 10th. And there's lots of different kinds of bedrooms available. And every day mountaineer trips will leave out of the house to go hike or mountain bike or canyoneer out of Moab. So a really great opportunity to spend a week in Utah. And then it turns out there's some local volunteer opportunities this coming month. Eric Peterson, the Los Alamos County Outdoor Recreation Specialist, is sponsoring 2 trail work party days, one Saturday, April 27th, and one Saturday, May 11th, just 9 to 11. You just have to show up in work clothes, and the county will provide all the tools that you need. They ask you to sign up ahead of time at volunteerlosalamos.org, and it'll give you all the details, but really a great opportunity for us to give back to our community. And then coming up further, these aren't on the specific calendar yet, but I know they're in the works. A Mount Taylor hike in June. That's the iconic volcano just north of Grants, New Mexico, and it's just beautiful. And it'll be a weekend car camping trip. Okay, so Deception Peak hike, cross that out, and it's going to be a Ancho to Red Dot, Blue Dot hike in May. That's been a change since the slides were made. Oh, you are both. Okay, so there's another, okay, great. Okay, so correction. Deception Peak hike, that's the peak next to Lake Peak out of the Santa Fe Ski Basin. It'll be a fabulously beautiful hike in July, but also a May hike along the Rio Grande here in our county. And then we'll have a beginner backpack in July, probably later in July, for people who want to try out backpacking. We have some tents and sleeping bags to lend, working with Peak, and that'll be a lot of fun. And then a repeat of the Moab hike. So if you have a trip you're interested in going on, let me know and I'll see if we can find a trip later for it. Or if you'd like to lead a trip, we'll get you set up. So it's going to be a good couple of months. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jean. Anne is up next with a safety share for March. Do you want me to advance? It's this guy.
Okay. So we thought we should have about maybe on a quarterly basis, a little safety share. And the spring is a good time to see rattlesnakes. So this is our safety note for the season ahead as the rattlesnakes begin to come out and get active. So, oops. Okay, third one. All right, so quickly, the number one thing is just avoid a conflict don't get in a conflict with a rattlesnake. To do this, we're all outdoors hiking. Make sure you're wearing boots, long pants, socks, avoiding tall grass. Don't reach into the underbrush. Be careful when climbing rocks and where you reach. Be aware of where you step, where you reach, where you touch, and just be aware of your surroundings. It's the number one thing. As you're hiking, step on a rock or a fallen tree, not just over a rock where a snake could be hiding with that you don't see. Snakes they want to avoid conflict. They don't want to get in conflict with you, so they will give you a warning if you have a chance. The number one thing is to stop. Stop right there. They react to motion. And also, it is not uncommon for injuries to occur from quickly jumping off the trail and falling down the side. So first reaction is stop. Remain calm. Look around to where the snake is and move slowly away. All right, I added a couple of fun facts about New Mexico. Of course, we're entering the snake season, April through October. And it was news to me that rattlesnakes are found only in the Americas. So they're unique to the Americas. We have between 7 and 10, depending on which sources you look at, here in New Mexico. And there was a little discrepancy on this, but there are several types of rattlesnakes that are protected. So you shouldn't try to harm rattlesnakes. If you find them in your yard, you need to contact appropriate authorities to move those. And while you use caution, avoid conflict, do note that bites are rare and mostly happen if they're provoked or threatened. And it was also noted that the most bites are people who have been consuming alcohol. They're at the most risk. Maybe they're just not as cautious. Somebody's shaking their head, but this was noted. All right, so a couple things to do if you're bit. Again, stay calm. You want to take care, stay calm, call for help. It is an emergency situation. Even though about 25% of the bites are dry and don't have poison, you want to always treat it as such. If you can, immobilize the affected area and keep that area below the heart. This will just slow down the spread of the poison. Contrary to some past things, do not apply first aid like incisions, tourniquets, ice and heat. Don't suck out the poison. Don't take caffeine or alcohol. That will worsen the situation. Get to medical facility as soon as possible. There wasn't a lot written on what if you're in a remote place, as many of us take off hiking and you're in a remote place. And, the choice, do you not want to get your blood moving and you stay waiting for help? Generally, that's not a good idea. You should slowly walk and keep moving to get out of where you are and get to help. And I have a few references if these are available on the website. You can ask me more, but I am right now a Google expert with several resources. I have only run into a rattlesnake on the trails once. We were able to walk around and make a wide berth, give it wide berth, and not provoke that rattlesnake. But I wish you safe and happy hiking. If you see a rattlesnake, give them room. That's their space. and don't mess with the snakes.
Okay, we're almost ready for our presentation to start tonight. I just have a few logistics for the presentation before we get it started. Our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience tonight. So for those of you watching from home, you can find the chat feature in the Zoom app menu bar. Type your questions to it says Peak Moderator, and then it has my name, Beth, in parentheses, in the chat window. And you can do this anytime during the talk, and then I'll read them during the Q&A at the end for Phil to answer. Please remember that not everybody in the room here with us has a microphone. It's a big room, can't hand them around. So there may be a delay when we're listening to a question from the live audience, but don't worry, we'll be back on in a second. And we'll repeat the question for everyone to hear. Last thing is that after the talk, you'll receive a short evaluation in your email. Please do take a moment to fill that out. Your input really helps us improve our future programs. All right, I'll hand it back to Anne to introduce our speaker for the night. And you can
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, I'm pleased to introduce Phil. Phil started hiking as a child in through Boy Scouts, has had an adventurous life hiking, rafting, and many outdoor activities around New Mexico. He took a look at those Colorado 14ers and says everybody does those. I guess at some point, you know, took on a challenge to himself to climb all the highest peaks in New Mexico, and this grew, and he's going to share that with us. But it was a pleasure at dinner to get to know Phil a little bit. He's an adventurous outdoors person all around New Mexico. If his face looks familiar, he's climbing these peaks, and we probably run into him and cross paths, and he leads a group out of Albuquerque that hikes very fast and vigorously up Sandia Mountain. What's that? Cardio hikes. So if you really want a vigorous one, look on Meetup for a cardio hike. All right, but Phil, I'm going to pass it to you to tell us about New Mexico's peaks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyway, I am excited to be here. I have my grandson, Luke, is the cameraman right there. And I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. And as she was mentioning, I was about around 50 years old. I'm 69 right now, and I was about 50 when I just decided, well, you know, everybody does the Colorado 14K peaks, and I would like to try to hike all the New Mexico high peaks. And one of the difficulties with the New Mexico high peaks is a bit of the logistics in some cases. So I had to jump through some really great hoops logistically to try to keep things very respectful. There's times I could, you know, snuck on and stuff, but I tried to do, you know, as best I could in some very logistical ways. But anyway, the first off, anybody know what mountain peak that is? Yes, you got it. Yeah, you've been there. So the picture, he's got it just right. I'm taking that picture from Chimayosos, and that's North Truchas. On the left is Medio and Middle Truchas, and peak 12,900, a little bit to the north, a little bit to this side of, right, let me, lost my thing. Go back. Here we go. So yeah, that's North Truchas. And my list is a really inclusive list. I went in to try to even find all the little sub peaks and everything. And I, from Mike Butterfield, he owns Butterfield Jewelers in Albuquerque. He's a peak bagger. He's written a couple great books. And I've gone into his books and found the very obscure peaks. I'm still looking at a few more obscure peaks in his book to get. But so it's was 184. I picked up a few more of the highest ones, the highest 190 in New Mexico. And with a little caveat, I have to say -2. And there's 2 I haven't gotten, and which I'll talk about in just a little bit. And I could have snuck on and had them. I've tried 4 years. I've tried to make donations and so forth to get it, but I haven't been able to do that. And anyway, so the highest, I started off hiking all the 12 and 13,000 foot peaks, and there are about around 80 of those. And then I went into, I thought, well, I'm going to have to keep, I want to keep going. So I went into the 11,000 foot peaks, and I got about, there's about 80 of those. And then I decided to get the highest 102 major peaks in New Mexico, which basically is from about 10,830 above. So Sandia Peak wouldn't count with it. And I'm still working on some kind of obscure ones a little bit. So it's a little bit hard to see maybe in this video. This is a picture of the state, and you can see the highest 184 in green. You can see them mostly conglomerated up towards the top. Over here, there's Whitewater Baldy. In the Gila, it's not bald and there's no whitewater. I don't know why they call it that. But, and you can see my little caveat right there, those 2 little red dots, which I'll talk about. And and that's a little closer view of it, the northern New Mexico part right there. And no, this is the northern New Mexico. Anybody guess what my little caveat is right there? Taos Pueblo. Tried 4 times. They actually took it to the council last year for me to go, but I never heard back from that with it. Oh gosh. And anyway, I logged all of my peaks on 3 different websites, and I put them on. The most competitive of the websites is List of John's Mountains. How many of you have heard of List of John's Mountains? Have some of you heard? Just one. But it's probably the most competitive, and it's just put together in the United States. And I put together, my trips are like massively documented. Over time, I've taken probably 30,000 pictures. And I've written over 200 trip reports, and I always do my GPS treks. Also, people could download the GPS. You can read my trip report and find out what not to do in many cases there. And then I drop a lot of times I drop my my GPS track on Google Earth and manipulate it to get a 3D image of it. And recently, and also I've been doing, started doing YouTube videos, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of all of the highest peaks in New Mexico. I got about 23. I started in the order that I've been doing them. But recently I've come across Google Earth Studios, and on which is also a great way to study your area before you go. You can you apply to get on Google Earth Studios. It's free. They let you know in a couple days if they accept you, but they accept everybody pretty much. And then you can put in the peak. And I've been on my YouTube videos, I've been getting a video that does all the peaks in the area, panoramic view, and you can drop your trail on it also. So it's a nice setup. But I put put them on a list of John's Mountains. That's probably the most competitive. And then I've got my YouTube videos there, right there, by the Wheeler Peak ones. That's my grandson's dad right there, although he quit with me a few years back peak bagging. But and I've I've got about 22, 23, but just a nice addition that I've been kind of happy with is that adding on my YouTube videos towards the end, putting Google Earth Studios on there. And if you're interested in finding out some about it and seeing some of the little videos and stuff, you can subscribe. Just put in my name and put 184 Peaks and you'll find it there. This is real sensitive here. Also, peakery.com. And how many have heard of peakery.com? I think that's my favorite. They do the whole Earth, all the mountains, and it's probably the most visual of all of them. And I've got right now about 2,600 pictures on there and all my trip reports and GPS tracks, but it's just a beautiful site to go and see, just gorgeous pictures of all over the world. That's my favorite. It's probably the most visual. And on peakery.com, they have challenges. And I would challenge you to do some of these challenges. Some of them, and they're getting peaks. It's very hard for me to leisurely hike. I gotta hike a peak and get it. I can't. It's very difficult to leisurely hike. But here's some of the challenges on peakery.com. We got New Mexico 12ers challenge. I think there's about 52 in there. We got the Taos 12 Peak Challenge, the Taos 5 Peak Challenge, and Albuquerque 20, Albuquerque 10, Santa Fe 20 Challenge. So I would challenge you to pick one of these and go do some of these peaks. The Albuquerque 5, Santa Fe 10, Santa Fe 5 Peak Challenge. You see on there that they have Thompson's Peak, Glorieta, Baldy. And also, this is my list, which is a very inclusive list. Now, how many have heard of peakbagger.com? Yeah, that's really the nicest, just to make a list, and it's probably the most technical. The most competitive is List of John's Mountains. The most visual is Peakery, but this is just the most technical and kind of nicest one to do here. And so of the highest 102 that I went for, they have to have a prominence of 280 feet. You know, and you can make your own challenges. You could do, well, I'm going to get the 55 that have a prominence of 500 feet, or I'm going to get the 150 that have a prominence of 150 feet, or I'm going to pick up the 25 in New Mexico that have 1,000-foot prominence. You can kind of make your own rules. I've made my own rules around just myself. I have to at least have 3 miles or I don't count it. So I've been to the top of Pikes Peak, but taking the cog train and going 100 yards, I could not log that one. So I've never logged Pikes Peak there. And these are some of the highest ones, and you recognize them. We've got 7 of the major and minor 13,000-foot peak, the highest Wheeler, which I've done 4 times, and the Truchas peaks. So there's more of the list. You can see my caveats right there. Still working on them. And there's more of the list, 134, 184. It's actually up to about it's 190. I've added some more in here. So I was going to talk about just some of the some little categories, a bit of what the let's see, check the time. What the categories, and I put a category together of the greatest logistical peak bagging struggles that I've had. And I would give number 4, I'm going to go down 4 to 1. Number 4, logistically most difficult, was hiking the highest peaks in northwest New Mexico. And the problem with it's on land grant, and it's Brazos Peak right there, and Grouse Mesa. So one of my tools to be able to hike peak is I have a 1992 Toyota Land Cruiser, which is just absolutely brutal. It has, the locking differential, and there's another vehicle, it will be there. And so this hike, took about a half day of 4-wheel driving, and then I went with a friend of mine, and we did a 14-mile round trip backpacking trip. But what was so difficult was it was on land grant. So I hunted the land grant people, contacted Grouse Mesa outfitters, and offered to pay. I went and met the people there. They let me on the land. I paid and hiked those peaks. Anybody been on top of those peaks, Grouse Mesa? But I paid the land grant fee to be on their peaks. Sorry, this is it's so hard to feel the little buttons on this thing. And, oh gosh. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So the number 3 logistical most difficult was just getting the peaks on Vermejo Park Ranch, which is Ted Turner's land in northern New Mexico. It's nearly the size of Rhode Island. And so I rode them, and my son and I started off to try to hike them. We saw the no trespassing signs, went back. I rode them. I'm an earth science teacher. Will you let me hike them? No. So twice I had to pay. I just decided, well, this is for me as great as going on a cruise. So I paid cruise ship prices twice to be on his land. They treated us like we were on a cruise ship too. And these were some of the peaks. You can see up here some pictures of them, and those were the peaks that I got on the 2 different trips to Vermejo Park Ranch. Any of you been on Vermejo Park Ranch? That is quite a spread. You feel like you've gone back in time, and I think all the animals in New Mexico, wild animals, go there. It's really incredible. Rather than go on a cruise, go on his land there, and some of the adventures they have. Right after we did that, they started offering peak bagging stuff too. They said we were the first ones that gone across. It was a 15-mile hike that we did across, and they said we were the first ones. A guide wanted to go with us. In Philmont Scout land, that was a logistic difficulty for me. I thought, I'm an Eagle Scout, they'll let me go, and that was not the case. And I was all planned, ready to go. I rode them, all kinds of stuff, and they said, no, only way you can get on our land is that you have to be part of Scouts. So I went back to my old troop, and I said, I'm only joining because I want to hike these peaks, but I'll volunteer a little bit. And so I volunteered about 2 years to get 5. Actually, there's another, Black Mountain. So I volunteered about 2 years so I could legitimately get those peaks. And then I trained and conditioned the boys there too. But that was logistically. And my number 1 logistic difficulty of the Pueblo Peaks. I could have snuck on and had them 3 or 4 times already, but I wanted as clean a record as I could get on things. I know just how I would do it. I've hiked as close as I can. I've gone up there a number of times and tried to hire a guide. I went and offered, I'm very motivated. I offered about $3,000 for the preservation of the Taos Indian land and to pay a guide $1,000. They took it to the council, but I never heard back with it. And I'm going to keep trying. I'll go back next summer and maybe actually make a donation, whether I go or not, and see if I can. So that's the toughest right there. And I could have had that plenty of times. Then the hardest peaks. I think probably and kind of going in order, the State Line Peak from going from, I kind of call that the hallmark hike of my life. You can see all across the top. We went down to the left, all the way to, the left is Big Costilla. The right is, what is the right? Anybody know? At State Line Peak. It was about a 15-mile hike. And that was pretty tough. That was on Ted Turner's Remejo Park Ranch. Number 9 of the hardest, the North Truchas Peak. There's a picture. I had the picture on the front there. My son and I did 24 miles, 2 or 3 days, but that was up in the tough ones, especially because you can't really get those peaks without backpacking. Jicarita Peak. An interesting thing, I was speaking at dinner tonight that we had to do it before lightning season. We were going to be 4 days above the timberline the whole time. So we had to do it before lightning season, which is about the first week in July on. But there were no springs of water up there, so we had to do it while the snow was still there so we could harvest snow for water. And it was just a gorgeous hike being above the timberline for all those days. Flag Mountain was a tough one because it was 3 days, 22.7 miles, a gain of about 7,200 feet for the time. And the first day I did almost 15 miles backpacking, about 6,500 feet. So that's up in the tough ones. Ash Mountain North, Ash Mountain South, those were tough because it was like first I did Little Costilla, and then I headed over to those peaks, and it's like walking across for two and a half hours, just boulders the size of Volkswagens and half a Volkswagen. It was a tough peak. Trampas, Santa Barbara Ridge. I had my very hardest downhill hiking ever with my dog. It was I learned on this hike, this is a little tip for you, I learned on this hike that it's better to go up or down a ridge than a valley in almost all cases. But it was a little narrow V-shaped valley with, I bet, a couple thousand trees along that V-shaped valley. It was so exhausting going down. But what motivated me, this is a big motivator, maybe been a motivator for you also, is I knew I couldn't live there. I knew I had to do the next log and the next log and the next log and keep going because I couldn't live there. So it was so tough coming down. That's number 5. Number 4, I called the Forest Service and I said, are there any blowdown trees on this hike I'm going on? No, there's nothing. It's just maybe a few. And I got to this one point, and I could just see endless down trees, way more than what you see right there. And I was just talking about it with Luke, my grandson, and I knew I could go one way, but I couldn't do the loop, and I had to get somebody. So I called, and it took me what would have been 20 minutes to. Took like 2.5 hours. I bet there were 10,000 logs. It's just over another one. And I had somebody pick me up rather than make the loop. Number 3, Vera Sylvia Peak. There's a lot easier way to go, but I went, it was very hard for me, about 4,000 feet elevation gain. I got there too early. I started what looked like a clear patch. It was solid oak, so it was just extremely difficult. I'm carrying a dog above my head because I couldn't get him through the oak. I'm cut and bleeding, and it's dark, and I'm wondering, what am I doing here? And that was a toughie. There's just a beautiful picture of it, and there's a lot easier way. That's why you want to read my trip reports and know how not to do it in a lot of the cases. And number 2 hardest was Sierra Mosca, because I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the trails in the peak bagging books show, there's this wonderful great trail, and there was probably a wonderful great trail in the 1960s, and you go to find that trail, and you'd need to almost be an archaeologist to find that trail. It's so hard for me not to do a peak, and I backed out of that one because I went after work to get halfway there, and I went and did another peak. But the false start made it hard and no trail, and that was tough. But I guess my toughest hike I did was, and I thought years on this, planned it, and that was South Fork Peak, and peak 11978. And my elevation gain for that one day was 7,100 feet per day, which is, you're calculating that, that's about a quarter of the way from sea level to Mount Everest in elevation gain in a day, and hard bushwhacking starting 4,000 feet straight up a hill. And it was very tough. So I think that's probably my number one toughest one right there. Then just some of the longest distance hikes. Actually, my longest for turning 60, I did Mount Whitney with my son, and that was 64 miles. But just in ones that are over 20 miles, the Wheeler Peak to Mount Walter, long distance, the Pecos Baldy one to Pecos Baldy Lake, Red Dome. There's a picture of Red Dome, and anybody know what those two peaks are right there? That's the Pecos Baldy East and Pecos Baldy West. And some others. Wheeler Peak with my friend. Flag Mountain was 2 days. That was a pretty long, exhausting one. Sierra Mosca, elevation gain for the 2 days was 6,200 feet, about 11.3 miles a day. These are just some of the ones that were the longest. The Latier Lake one, Wheeler Peak, actually I've done it 4 times now. Wheeler Peak and staying at Horseshoe Lake was a long one. 29.5 miles to get south. Churches Peak, they anytime they label a new peak somewhere, I have to go get it. So it brings about a whole new hike about. And the Jicarita Peaks, this was the one where we had to harvest snow. That was 34.5 miles. North Truchas, 37.5. Cibola, that was the one I went across all those logs at the Forest Service. I called the Forest Service back and I said, hey, don't tell people there's no logs there. But that's the one with Cibola Peak, that 29.5 miles. And where are we? And then I've done Truchas Peak so many times. I did it 4 times, 35 miles, another time at 50. That's my favorite area. And someone was asking me at dinner tonight, I'll just share in a tiny bit where my favorite hike is, and that is in let me check the time here. That is in the Pecos Wilderness, starting at the Santa Barbara campground, and that's why you see so many. I just love that area up there. Starting in the Santa Barbara campground, up the East Fork of the Santa Barbara River. It's best to do it in 5 days. You could do it in 4, and then across Skyline Ridge with the gorgeous views to Truchas Lake, and then hiking Truchas Peak the next day and out the West Fork of the Santa Barbara. And I'm sure somebody knows what that peak is right there. What is that? What's that peak? That's actually Truchas right there. That's Truchas. That's Little South Truchas, which I had to do a whole hike just to get that one. That's Medio Truchas and Middle Truchas right there on it. And just some of my favorite peaks we have here. You know why I like that little peak, Oshaw Mountain, and those side peaks is, you know, there's the road to Taos There's the high road to Taos, but there's also the ultra high road to Taos, and that's taken a 4-wheel drive deep to the east. And I guess that was one of my favorites just because it was such an incredible 4-wheel drive road to take. So if you have a 4-wheel driver, I think I put on my trip reports how to do it, but to take the ultra high road to Taos. Mount Taylor, which you got to hike in June coming up. That's a favorite one because just the beautiful views. I spent the night on top of there one time watching the lights of Albuquerque come on. Wheeler Peak, a favorite. Little Costilla. I'm going to have to do that one again this summer because there's a little bump on the other side I'm going to need sometime. San Antonio Mountain is a beautiful one. Santa Barbara Peak. I've been there, and that's a picture right there of Santa Barbara Peak. Not much, but it's such a beautiful setting right there, and it is difficult to get to the top. Gold Hill. How many have been to Gold Hill, the top of Gold Hill? Yeah, go to Goose Lake and up Gold Hill. That's such a iconic peak in New Mexico. That's my favorite unnamed peak, Peak 12, 9,000. Jicarita Peak is a favorite. Big Costilla, and that was on Ted Turner's land. Penitente Peak. How many been on top of Penitente Peak? You know what's so unique about Penitente Peak to me is in all my peak bagging and mountain climbing stuff, it was the place that I think if you want to stand in New Mexico and get the greatest views, that's the peak right there because you can see Wheeler all the way to Latir. You can see the Sandia Mountains. You can see all the way to Sierra Blanca near Ruidoso. So it's go there on a clear day and you can see just about forever from that point. And my very favorite Truchas Peak, which I've been 6 times, actually probably about 8 or 9 getting other little peaks in the area. Anybody know what that peak is right there? I'll just real quick go through a few peaks and pictures and end up in a few minutes here. Anybody know that? You're seeing it from the backside, so it's not a familiar look to you. That is Santa Fe Baldy from another. Did you say that? You said it? I didn't hear that. Good going. Yeah, it's Santa Fe Baldy. And what did I put? All but. Oh, you know, the neat thing about New Mexico is New Mexico's timberline is about 12,000 feet. So you've got about 80 some, and of all 80 of the peaks, there's only 2 that are hidden in trees. So you, on all the 12,000 feet except 2, you get incredible views. And I mentioned I don't count a peak unless I get 3 miles. And, you know, all of these peaks can be climbed, and you don't have none of them you need ropes to climb. There's a lot of them you could climb with ropes if you went a particular direction, but all of them can be climbed without ropes. So there's Santa Fe Baldy, and that's Santa Fe Baldy. These are some Santa Fe Baldy ones here. What do I have? And right there, I'll backtrack one. But when I restarted with my son, we were carrying the old backpack stuff that I used to have. I'd carry about 55 pounds. And then I went almost like an art. I went into I didn't want ultralight camping, you know, where your sleeping bag and your poncho is a garbage bag. I didn't want to go quite that far with things. So I term it ultralight luxury. So I knocked down from 55 pounds to 30, and almost always I take 2 pounds of T-bone steaks and cook it I keep it real ultralight, so I use a 2-ounce chicken wire grill and cook it right on the coals. And my friends have told me it's as good as the best restaurants there too. So that's kind of the next picture. You can see my little chicken wire grill there, 2 ounces. And there's my tent. That's my favorite. I have a whole lot of different tents. And you know, I've done the frameless backpacks, and the frame backpacks, but that's kind of my staple. It carries a lot. I like the frame. I found that you can hike and you can rest, and I like that metal. I can lift it off my shoulders, and I pretty much go at a pace. I pretty much hike all day, and that's my little tent with it. And then another kind of neat thing I found is you can get a little backpack like that one that only weighs a pound and goes about that size, so you can go to your camp and then reuse that little 1 pound backpack. I got about 3 minutes and then questions. So here's my tent. I'll just try to zoom through, and I have the down. I love down sleeping bags because they pack so small, and yet they are just so warm. I love the down, and I didn't used to use pad, but I'm getting old, so I use a pad now. So, and then I put my GPS tracks, and I was mentioning most of my hikes I have dropped on Google Earth. And that's not a great 3D image of it, but if you go to my sites, and I'm even dropping them on the YouTube thing, I typically put a 3D view of the hike where it is. And there's Santa Barbara Peak. I'm just gonna real quick, that's when we had to harvest snow on the one. There's our trip where we spent the whole time above Timberline, hiking on Skyline Ridge. And there I am in Boy Scouts right there. I got it in, we used to go once per month as a kid, and it went in my blood. That was a 50-mile hike in the Pecos Wilderness. Those are you can spot my 3 buddies with the same color backpack right there. I'm still in touch with them too. There's my award for it. There we are hiking up to the Skyline Ridge as a kid. And I was actually one of the first persons to get a dome tent. That's when I was about 19. And there I am, 19. Do I look different? Right there. There I am, about 19. There's a poor picture way back. And I asked about, those are Truchas Peaks right there. I love to try to get all different levels of pictures on the hikes. And I'm going real quick. Had a little fun. I turned it with Adobe Photo into a golf course, the Truchas golf course right there. So it's kind of fun, but it almost looks like that. I added a few more fairways. And there's my son. I'm not too big on that bivy tent. I tried a lot of different things, and some of my favorite high alpine flowers. There I'm at the Truchas Lakes, and there's my favorite hike I was just talking about right there. And there it is on Google Earth. That's the one I was telling you from Santa Barbara Campground. It's probably my favorite hike. I just redid Trail Riders Wall recently, so I'm gonna real quick just go through. You can see most of my pictures on my. I love I'm a liquid cooker. I like the liquid stuff. And you always spot those little birds in the Pecos. I'm sure you've seen them in places. They're some of the most curious little birds. And real quick, I'm going to jump to the end. So my time is about up. Yeah, and actually I had her cut out half. I mean, I put together a huge one that lasts me for years here. I did. I wanted to mention just some of my favorite equipment. I know when I first started, you probably done this, and that we used to use halazone tablets when I was in Scouts, and before that it was iodine, and then when I started again, it's just like pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping, and that was a little maybe better than the halazone tablets, but this is a gravity filter one, and that's 10 liters of water, and it's almost like going like a small sink when you use it. So you go down to the lake it's got a holder on it, you know, 5 2-liter bottles of soda thing, 10 liters. And that lasts pretty much the whole time you're there. And it just, so that's my number one equipment item for you right there, that Katadyn 10-liter thing. And it flows again, just almost like a slow sink. And there it is being used. And also, I just wanted to mention real quick on my equipment. I really get into things, and so I put all of my equipment on an Excel program, and then you can go ahead of time. You just click, and you know just what your weight is, or you can step on a scale too. Is another way to do that, but. So that's all my equipment. If anybody wants me to, I could email you my equipment list stuff here, and I have all the weights. You could put your own stuff in there, and just kind of fun a little bit. So that's my equipment. I could send you that, and that's a presentation at another time, sometime about my favorite hike as far as stuff. So anyway, I went like 3 minutes over what I should. So any questions that I can answer? It's been just my pleasure to do this and share. And you can see I'm way over prepared here. So. Any questions? Yes?
So there's a couple of peaks you mentioned, Old Mike and Taos Cone and some of those. When I was up there years past, there were signs about it was off limits. What was how'd you work those?
Well, if I didn't actually cross a no trespassing sign with it too, plus it is actually on both, it's on the border there. And my son and I were hiking up from Taos Cone, and we heard gunshots. And so we thought, are these crazies? Should we run or should we go back? So we went back, and they were the Taos Rangers. And I said, could we just hike the peaks along this edge? And they said no. And I said, I asked him again, asked him like 3 times. He said, okay, you can hike the peaks along this edge and go there, but it's on the Forest Service and Taos, but they kind of view it as theirs. But they actually did give me permission the hard way on that a bit, with gunshots at us. My son heard the bullet before we heard the sound, but I don't think they were actually trying to shoot to get us, but they impressed us there. Other questions? Yes.
Actually shooting, they were shooting knowing you were there.
Yeah, I think they thought, well, there they are, let's shoot about 50 feet over from them. I don't think they were actually shooting at us, so, but they did give us the okay but coming up that other way, so I don't think there's signs anymore there. Sometimes there maybe has been a sign, but I don't think there's signs anymore from that way. And it's on the border, Forest Service and their land too. But the others are deep in their land. Other questions? Yes?
But I look very carefully at your photos, and I don't think it rains on them.
I know how to make it stop raining as you put on your rain poncho. I'm not going to put it on, then you put it on. And as soon as you put it on, it stops raining. I've been really fortunate. I have had very little rains. I think the worst rain that I got in was when I was in Boy Scouts, and we went from Truchas Peak to the Pecos Baldy Lake, and we hiked all day, and it was poured in the morning, poured in the afternoon. We would use plastic as tents, and I can remember the rain hitting us, my face about that far from the plastic, rained all day. But I've been fortunate. I haven't had very many all the way rains. I did have one 2 years ago up near the Truchas Peaks, where it was during it was cold and it rained all the time and I had wet clothes, and I wrote a trip report about that, but only a couple. It's pretty amazing. I really haven't had too many rain issues. Yes, sir. A bit, yeah. You stay at their place, and they have 5-star chefs and 5-star dinners. And I remember we were 6 hours in the roads that particular day that we did a 15-mile hike, and we got back at 10:30, and the chefs were waiting for us, and we had an elk steak and I think my son had a buffalo steak, and then they said, what do you want? And we said, well, do you have banana splits? They had banana splits for us, and they treated us a lot like we were on a cruise ship. Best barbecue I've ever had in my life on that. So just the experience was well worth it there. Other questions?
So we'll switch to just a couple that came in online. A couple questions about your backpack. What's the average pack weight you carry now? And do you still carry full packs to the summits?
That one that we had to harvest snow, we had to carry full packs the whole way, and it was about a 30-some mile hike. And my packs have been dwindled down from 55 to, including steak and a lot of water, about 31 pounds now. And it's really ultralight luxury. It's just as nice as when I had the 55-pound packs. I really did a lot of research on things. And again, anybody want my equipment list and stuff, I could email you that. You could put it in your own Excel program or something. So around 30 now. But whenever I do any kind of conditioning hikes, I take about 15 just to stay in condition, even if just the cardio hikes that I do. The cardio hikes are kind of interesting that I lead in Albuquerque. We blast up the mountains as hard as we can for an hour, regroup, and blast down. And anybody can go at any pace, and they stop at the hour point there. It's about 4 to 6 miles, about 12 to 1,600 feet elevation gain. And you don't have to... I'm probably in as good a shape as I was in high school or college, but that's because I work at it. You get a free ticket till age 40, and then you got to work at it after that. And I haven't missed 3 cardiovascular exercises in this month is 19 years. So I really keep consistent to keep in good shape. And my goal, I'm 69 right now, my goal is to hike Kilimanjaro at 70. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Another question?
All right, so what about peak bagging outside of New Mexico?
Not too much. For age 60, I did Mount Whitney. My son and I were on a lottery. We couldn't get on the lottery, so we had to go with REI Adventures. It was a 64-mile thing with REI Adventures. So I got Mount Whitney for 60. 65, I did the highest peak in Colorado, and I think it works. If you've done the highest peak, all the others count down below there. So I've only done 2 in Colorado, State Line Peak, and then I did with my daughter. We hiked the highest in Arizona, Humphreys, and so not too much out of the state. And plus, it's so great you don't have to drive so far, here. Even though I've driven 10 hours sometimes in New Mexico just to get a peak in a day. Another question?
Are there any more in the room for us here? All right, so just if throw your hand up if something comes up, I'll watch for you. We did have at least one request for your equipment list. I'll get you that email address. If anybody else thinks of it later and they want those things that Phil offered, you can always respond to any of those registration emails, and I can pass along that information.
Yeah, if you would, Beth, pass that along, and I'll send it to them. And then you can plug in your stuff and just, I get a little electronic weighing device. Actually, I use from my science lab, I use the old spring ones at first. Now I have an electronic one, and then just put it in and click, 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 or stand on a scale and see.
Okay, if those are all the questions, I just want to thank Phil again for sharing your peak bagging adventures with us tonight. Everybody, please remember to look out in your email for the survey coming, and do check out Peak's website for some great spring and even summer programming coming up. Our big Earth Day festival is coming up in April. Hope to see you there and at the next couple Mountaineers meetings. Thanks everybody again for joining us this evening, and have a good night.
And on my YouTube channel, if you get on that, I'm gradually doing that. Now eventually I'll get all 30,000 of those pictures on that. I can't get that many pictures on the other, but I can get it on that. So thank you all. It's been fun. Thank you.